Black Bolt has given new life to the Conkeldurr deck by simply printing a 70 HP Timber. We used to only have the 80 HP Timbers, and you had to search them with Nest Ball or Ultra Ball, making this deck super clunky. But with the 70 HP edition for the Timber, we are able to search them out with Buddy Buddy Poffin, which makes all the difference in the world with this really powerful single prize rogue deck. Let's go ahead and break down the list. Our main attacker in this deck is going to be the Timber line with Conkeldurr and Conkeldurr. We run the 4-1-3 line. You want to be able to manually evolve up your Conkeldurr with the Conkeldurr for potential TM Devo plays that your opponent could try to do against you. It's honestly just kind of easy to draw into. We have so much draw power in this deck with the Dunsparce and Enriching Energy that most of the time you just kind of draw into the Conkeldurr when you've already got two of them down. You manually evolve one and use Rare Candy on the other. Conkeldurr is the star of this show. It has the Gutsy Swing attack that does 250 damage if it's affected by a special condition. So basically, you're swinging for 250 damage for free. All you have to do is get your Timber evolved up to Conkeldurr and poison it with your Brute Bonnet. Absolutely crazy attack, and the math just honestly works so well with most of the meta decks right now. When you swing into a Goldingo EX, if it's poisoned, you do 250 damage, and that additional 10 damage goes up to the 260, knocking it out between turns, which makes it so Pheasantipity does not activate. Pheasantipity not being activated due to poison is one of the best parts of this deck. Being able to swing for 250 damage on a single price Pokemon is just really, really powerful. In the current meta, a lot of our decks do play cards such as Pheasantipity. They play Teal Mask Ogrepon, Raging Bolt, a lot of cards that are just basic EX Pokemon that have less than 250 HP. And with Poison in our Stadium cards, we can even reach the Stage 2 EX Pokemon threshold. Our draw support in this deck is kind of strange. We play the Dunsparce to Dunsparce line with the Enriching Energy. The Dunsparce has the ability Runaway Draw that says once during your turn, you can draw 3 cards, then shuffle this card back into your deck, basically giving you unlimited cycles of your Dunsparce. And if you attach the Enriching Energy, you draw 4 more, and then you can shuffle the Dunsparce and the energy back into your deck and search out the energy to keep the draw 7 combo with the Dunsparce going every single turn. With 4 Dunsparce on the board and your Enriching Energy, you can draw up to 16 cards every single turn without a drawback. And with all the Pokemon search we play and just the immense draw power that we have, getting the Dunsparce back into play to keep drawing with your Dunsparce is relatively easy. I've never really struggled with draw power in this deck. Brute Bonnet sets up our poison with its ability Toxic Powder. You have the Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached to your Brute Bonnet, and then you can poison your Conkeldurr, allowing it to swing for 250 damage with no energy. Absurdly powerful. We do have a 3-3 line of those. If your opponent ends up taking knockouts on 3 of your Brute Bonnets, you're probably going to lose anyway. So that is the one downfall to this deck. If you don't have access to your Brute Bonnet, you cannot attack with your Conkeldurrs, most likely resulting in a loss on your end. The Conkeldurr is just so much of a threat, though, that most of the time your opponent just can't ignore it to go after the Brute Bonnets. And if they do go after the Brute Bonnet and you set up another one, normally they just kind of concede the fact that you're going to have poison in play and they leave it alone. Going after 3 of these in a row is a very difficult task. That's why we run the 3-3 line. I didn't think the 4-4 line was necessary. Did open up quite a few slots for other tech cards, allowing us to reach specific numbers and just have more draw and Pokemon search. So 3-3 was what I figured would be the best. If you went up to a 3-4 line of this to make sure you could draw into the Booster Energy Capsule, probably would help a little bit with the consistency in the early game. But most of the time, you don't really need poison until turn 2 or 3. Fan Rotom in this deck, it makes so much sense. Honestly, the Assault Landing attack that Fan Rotom has for 70 damage is your main early game attack. Attacking your opponent's Dreepies, attacking your opponent's Ralts, anything under 70 HP. And it just swings the price trade in your favor because your opponent has to deal with either the Fan Rotom or trying to come up with a gusting option to go after your Timber on the bench. Normally, they just end up attacking into the Fan Rotoms, so it allows you to build up in the background for your big one-hit KO swings with your Conkeldurr. You also get the bonus of Fan Call. You're able to search out 3 colorless Pokemon with less than 100 HP. You could get 3 Dunsparce, or you could get 2 Dunsparce and the second Fan Rotom if you know you're going to be using them to attack multiple times. The best part about Fan Rotom is you can attach a Binding Mochi to the Fan Rotom to take knockouts on things such as Monkey Dory that have 110 plus HP. You do 110 damage once you attach the Binding Mochi, and then you get 10 additional damage between turns. If you have the Perilous Jungle, you can do more damage, but if your Fan Rotom is poisoned and Perilous Jungle is in play, you do put yourself on a clock. You can only have it in play for 2 turns until the poison knocks you out as well. So you have to be careful with the poison. You don't normally want to have Perilous Jungle in play when you are attacking with your Fan Rotom, because you don't want your opponent to be able to knock you out with something such as a Badoo, item lock you, and get a prize. You want to avoid that. So the only time you should be using the Binding Mochi on Fan Rotom is honestly to take out Conkeldurrs. You could also use them to take out Draclocks, things like that. But most of the time, it's used to take out Conkeldurrs. Blood Moon Ursaluna EX is kind of a late game closer here. Mainly used in matchups, use basic EX Pokemon as their attacker. The main one that comes to mind is Raging Bolt. Blood Moon Ursaluna does one-shot a Raging Bolt when they have 1 prize card or 2 prize cards left, and you use a Jet Energy or the Enriching Energy to get the last energy cost for the Blood Moon attack for 240 damage. Most of the time, you honestly win before you get to the point of using Blood Moon Ursaluna, but you can get into really close games if your opponent uses single prize Pokemon to attack you for most of the game, and then they try and bring out like a Raging Bolt or some other EX Pokemon in the late game to kind of wall you out where you can't take a knockout because you're out of Conkeldurrs. You can use Binding Mochi, Perilous Jungle, Poison to reach up to 290 damage with the Binding Mochi. And if you have the jungle in play, you can hit 310 damage with Blood Moon Ursaluna once you factor in the poison tick between turns, which is enough to knock out Gardevoir EX. I do play the Pekka with the Toxic Subjugation. This does put 5 more damage counters if your opponent's Pokemon is poisoned. You can take knockouts on cards that have 70 or 80 HP if they're not a dark type. With the Pekka, it's similar to the Fan Rotom. It's kind of like an early game pressure card. And you can also have this in the background. Say you're playing against a Charizard EX, you swing with the Gutsy Swing, you have the Binding Mochi attached, you're swinging for 290 damage. Your opponent's Charizard EX has 330 damage. If they attack into your Conkeldurr and you promote the Pekka, the 5 extra damage counters will be applied and the knockout will happen on that turn. And you will get 2 prize cards between turns while they only get 1. Pekka just kind of fixes some math with poison. It puts early game pressure on your opponent's little HP Pokemon, and in the late game, fixes math. Once your opponent takes a knockout on your active, you can promote this to the active spot, and then you use your Jet Energy to get your preferred attacker into the active spot. Finding your Jet Energy is very, very simple in this deck because we do play 4 Hilda and 4 Chorus's Tenacity. Hilda is a new card out of Black Bolt along with Timber. Allows you to search for an evolution Pokemon and a special energy. Normally, you're using this to find your Dunsparce and Enriching Energy for a draw 7 after you've played your supporter for turn. You can also use it to find your Girder and your Conkeldurr. But like I said, most of the time, it's for the Dunsparce and Enriching Energy to keep your draw going. Chorus's Tenacity finds a special energy, either the Jet or the Enriching Energy. And it gets a Stadium, whichever one you need for the turn. If you need a tool, we grab Town Store. If you need more damage, we grab the Mochi. If you need more poison, we grab the Jungle. Or if you need just basic Pokemon, we grab Artisan. If you want to reduce the HP of your opponent's Stage 2 Pokemon, grab the Gravity Mountain. Sometimes your opponent will put a card such as like Pidgeot EX in the active because it does resist fighting. So you're only doing 220 damage to Pidgeot EX between turns. If you have like Perilous Jungle in play, it adds up to 250. And then they retreat it to the bench to kind of keep it safe. If you play Gravity Mountain, you can actually take knockouts on like Stage 2 Pokemon in certain scenarios with Gravity Mountain just by playing it to the board. I played this at a League Challenge, and I had that exact scenario come up where my opponent used their Pidgeot to tank a hit. And then I won the match, took my last 2 prize cards by playing Gravity Mountain and knocking out their Pidgeot because it only had 250 HP once it was in play. But we don't play any other draw support other than just finding our Enriching Energy and being able to shuffle it back into the deck with the Dunsparce. That's all we really need. So we have 4-4 supporter line. It's probably the least amount of supporters I've ever played in a deck. Can't think of any time I've ever played just 2 4-of copies of a supporter, and that's it. Playing Great Ball doesn't feel great, but Great Ball does allow us to find the Dunsparce. It allows us to find the Conkeldurr line, allows us to find any of our basic Pokemon. It's really helpful in the early game. Buddy Poffin gets our Dunsparce after you use a couple of runaway draws. Play the Buddy Poffin. You can get your Dunsparce back out after you've just shuffled them into the deck. You can also get your Timbers, which is the main point of this deck. The 70 HP Timbers allow you to not play Precious Trolley. Before, if you played this deck, you had to play Precious Trolley to be able to get the 80 HP Timbers out, and it was just really hard to set it up. Now you can play Buddy Buddy Poffin and not even worry about playing Nest Ball. The fact that we don't play Nest Ball in this deck anymore because we're able to use Buddy Buddy Poffin is just absolutely crazy. We play the 4 Ultra Ball because we do need to be able to search out our Conkeldurr and our Dunsparce and honestly our Blood Moon Ursaluna and Fan Rotom. We need all of these cards. All of these cards are so very important to your setup. Your optimal setup is always going to be at least 2 Timber and at least 2 Dunsparce. Depending on if you played Fan Rotom, it could be 3 Dunsparce. In your first turn, if you're able to get 4 Dunsparce in play, that's completely fine because you will be able to use Runaway Draw to free up the bench space to put down your Brute Bonnet for poison. You do have to have Brute Bonnet for the poison, so having 2 Timber, 2 Dunsparce, and a Brute Bonnet on your bench, and then you'll have your Dunsparce, Fan Rotom, or just Timber in the active, depending on what you start for the turn. You could get lucky and start Pekka-Runt, but that's never happened with me. I've always had to switch that into the active whenever it's needed. 4 Rare Candy. The only reason we play 4 Rare Candy is because we don't have a way to search for it. We don't play Arven or anything to search for items. So we have to just count on drawing into it. And drawing into it with 4 of is just so much better than trying to draw into it with 3. Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, we have 3 of those because we do play the Town Store. We're able to find it with Colress's Tenacity. That is a way to search for the Energy Capsule. One of the reasons we only play 3, and then we talked about before how we just don't need 4 of either of these cards, especially since we play the Town Store, to be able to find any tool card for the turn. We can find the Energy Capsule or the 2 Binding Mochi. The additional 40 damage from the poison with Binding Mochi just helps so many matchups that it's just, honestly, I wish we had 3 of them. If I were to make one change to this deck, I would potentially cut the Pekka-Runt and just add in a 3rd Binding Mochi. Most of the time that would help the matchups more favorably in the early game, especially like with Fan Rotom, and then having 1 or 2 Binding Mochis left over in the late game for Ursaluna and Conkeldurr. But usually we can get by with 2 Binding Mochis as long as you play it correctly. Town Store helps us find those 2 cards. Perilous Jungle, add 30 additional poison damage. Artisan allows us to find our Timber, Dunsparce, just basically a Nest Ball that is searchable with Colress's Tenacity. And honestly, it doesn't really matter if you give your opponent access to a bunch of single price Pokemon. Most people are only playing 1 or 2 single price Pokemon, so you don't really have to worry about being run over by single price Pokemon. You can just knock them out with your Fan Rotom and the poison damage with Pekka-Runt. You should be fine. Decks like Gardevoir, it really doesn't matter because they're going to be playing an Artisan anyway. Just bump it with another one of your stadiums and your following turns. Gravity Mountain fixes the HP math on a lot of Stage 2 Pokemon. It helps against Ethan's Typhlosion. It helps against Dragapult, Gardevoir. It just helps against every Stage 2 deck that this deck would struggle into otherwise. You have to have one of these. Most games, you're going to be like, man, this is kind of like a dead card. But the matches you do need it. If you don't have it, you would have lost otherwise. 3 Jet Energy, 1 Enriching Energy. You could also cut maybe the Pekka-Runt. This is like the swing card here. I personally enjoy the Pekka-Runt. I utilize it enough to where it feels like it's valuable enough to keep in the deck. But if you were to cut this and add a 4th Jet Energy, I wouldn't blame you. Prizing a couple of these is not fun. In the League Challenge, I took this deck too. I actually was only running 3 Rare Candy and 4 Jet Energy. I just struggled to find the Rare Candy, so I made the swap to 3 Jet and 4 Rare Candy. But one match, I did prize 3 of the 4 Jet Energy, and it felt really, really bad. So having 4 Jet Energy, 4 Rare Candy may just be the play. Get rid of the Pekka-Runt. Honestly, that really is the only swing card. You really can't cut anything else. If you cut any of these other cards, you would struggle into a variety of matchups. It wouldn't just be one matchup you would struggle into. You would struggle into more than one matchup without every single one of these cards. The Enriching Energy, a spec, is kind of what ties this whole deck together. You attach it to your Dunsparce, you draw 4, you use your Dunsparce Runaway Draw to draw 3 more, and then you put the Enriching Energy back into your deck to be able to search it with your Hilda and Colress's Tenacity in the following turns. It's really nice when you have this going first. Being able to draw 4 cards on your first turn going first is so valuable, and it comes up more than you might think. This deck is just so extremely powerful and kind of catches people off guard. They don't really expect to be playing against Conkeldurr, especially with how easy it is to get relevant information on powerhouse meta decks off of like Limitless TCG, which we are using to showcase the deck today. But most people are just really well versed in playing against specific decks that are high in the meta usage. So if you bring something like this, your opponent doesn't really know what you're going to be playing, and it's really hard for them to count your cards. It's really hard for them to, honestly, to beat you. Swinging for 250 damage with a single price Pokemon with poison, damage ticks, and just low HP attackers with Fan Rotom, and a late game closer with Blood Moon Ursaluna. A lot of decks just can't deal with it. Love this deck. It's so much fun to play. Let's go ahead and hop into a few matches, and I'm going to show you guys how this works.